My name is Jang Yuan. Yesterday, I was a normal person scrolling through my phone. Today, I'm a skeleton. Not metaphorically. I have no skin, no internal organs, and my fingers make a clicking sound when I move them. I discovered this approximately 3 seconds after regaining consciousness in what appeared to be a medieval forest, and the discovery was not pleasant. The good news, if any of this had good news, was that I wasn't just any skeleton. Something deep in whatever remained of my consciousness recognized what I had become, an undead lord. The kind of being from fantasy novels who could raise the dead, forge soul links with servants, and grow stronger as those servants evolved. A necromancer with architectural ambitions. I decided to test the theory immediately. There was a grave nearby, freshly covered, recently dug, and I approached it with the particular confidence of someone who has no better options. I struck what I imagined was a dramatic pose, extended my skeletal hand, and pushed the power outward. The ground moved. A skeleton crawled out. He was yellowed and unstable, missing a few connections that suggested the original burial had been rushed, but he was upright and moving and responding to my will through a direct channel I could feel humming through my chest cavity where organs used to be. I named him Skeleton Number 1. We were celebrating this small miracle when a man appeared on the hillside. He was carrying farming tools and wearing the expression of someone who has just watched a stranger dig up his father. I tried to explain the situation in a friendly manner. This was, in retrospect, a mistake because a skeleton's attempt at friendly conversation produces jaw movements and hollow socket staring that reads as menacing rather than apologetic. His expression shifted from grief to fury. He charged. I had 2 options, fight or flee. I couldn't win a fight. Number 1 was barely upright, and I was brand new to having bones, so I attempted negotiation instead. I grabbed Number 1 as a hostage and made a slicing gesture across his neck to indicate I was serious. This also was a mistake. The villager went beyond fury into a category of rage I didn't have words for yet. I turned and ran. I am, it turns out, a clumsy skeleton. The ground is full of obstacles I hadn't anticipated. Roots, loose stones, one extremely inconvenient stray dog. And I went down face first on the hillside while Number 1, carried by the momentum of my fall, hit the ground with enough force to scatter into component pieces. The skull separated from the spine. The ribs detached individually. I didn't have time to locate the arms before I pushed through a dense thicket of bushes and hid. The shouting faded. The forest went quiet. I sat under a tree and looked at the pile of bones in my lap. Being a necromancer is considerably more complicated than the story suggests. The reassembly took careful attention. Bones have a correct orientation, and convincing a skeleton structure to acknowledge this while your only tools are your own skeletal fingers requires patience I wasn't sure I had. Number 1 stood up missing his left arm, which I hadn't been able to recover before the villager got too close. But he was functional and present, and that was the important part. Communication was immediately identified as a significant obstacle. I tried to teach him a handshake as a basic social gesture. He misinterpreted the intent entirely and removed his own head to offer it to me. I stood holding his skull while his body stood slightly ahead of us. Empty eye sockets pointed in my general direction, and experienced my first moment of genuine philosophical discomfort in this new life. I put his head back. We moved on. Real-world practice seemed more productive than conceptual instruction. I found a rabbit and decided hunting was a reasonable first lesson, guiding Number 1 through the mechanics of identifying prey and applying appropriate force. He poked at the rabbit with the exploratory uncertainty of someone who has never had muscles, and the rabbit, demonstrating more survival instinct than I'd credited it with, kicked one of his fingers off and bolted. We recovered the finger. We caught the rabbit eventually with significant guidance from me. The energy that flowed through our soul link from the kill was minimal. Barely a flicker, not nearly enough to suggest this approach would build an army of any significance. Then something unexpected happened. Number 1 picked up a wooden branch. He had watched me demonstrate the hunting motion twice. Now, without instruction, he began practicing it himself, slow at first, awkward, stepping on his own feet, overcorrecting in ways that made him stumble. I watched without intervening. He failed repeatedly and kept trying. When a squirrel crossed the clearing, he tracked it without prompting, timed the branch, and struck it mid-leap with the focused certainty of something that had just understood how its body worked. The energy that came through the soul link was not a flicker. It was a surge, pure, concentrated, completely unlike anything the rabbit kill had produced. The first genuine independent thought. The first successful act of autonomous reasoning. I understood in that moment what the system was actually rewarding. Not kills. Breakthroughs. The moment a servant stopped executing commands and started thinking for itself. I used the power immediately. Number one's bones grew longer and brighter, shifting from yellowed fragility to clean white solidity. A bone sword formed in his remaining hand. He was taller, more stable, fundamentally changed. A Tier 1 skeleton soldier where there had been a shaky assemblage of grave bones. I had a system. I had a proof of concept. I had one soldier. Time to scale. The forest accepted me in ways the human world hadn't. Partly because the trees didn't have opinions about necromancy, and partly because the darkness between them felt like somewhere I was supposed to be. I sent number one ahead to scout while I followed at a careful distance. A pack of wolves found us within the hour. 4 of them, circling with the confidence of predators who had never been given reason to doubt themselves. I stayed back to observe. Number one was decisive and completely fearless. The wolf threat simply didn't register as a threat, which was either a cognitive limitation or a tactical advantage, depending on how you interpreted it. He took the first wolf down with a single strike to the skull, and the second in the same motion. I put a stone into the third wolf's legs when it tried to run, and number one closed the distance before it recovered. For dead wolves, I stood over the bodies thinking about the problem of growth rate, and then wondering whether the restriction to human bone was actually a rule or just an assumption I'd carried over from stories. I touched the nearest wolf's body. The power moved through my hand without resistance, and the flesh dissolved while the bones reorganized, reshaping, clicking, realigning into the standard configuration my system recognized. Wolf bones, but human-shaped skeleton. Tier 1. Loyal. Present in my soul link. I named them 2 through 5 and felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who has just discovered a significant production shortcut. The armed patrol concept was straightforward. Move around the forest's edge, broadcasting the presence of organized undead. Attract wandering wild skeletons through something like species magnetism. Scatter them when they arrived, and reassemble them as soldiers. The approach scaled well. Within 2 days, I had 100. Standing before 100 skeletons in a forest clearing and attempting to conduct a military drill was a different kind of experience. Everyone look at me. Line up in a square. Some of them slid left. Some spun in place. 2 embraced each other and began examining each other's bones with what appeared to be scientific curiosity. Practice swinging. Attack the trees. The sound of clacking bones filled the clearing. Not a single tree was struck. Every swing found another skeleton instead. I held my skull in my hands and tried to think of this as a management problem rather than a catastrophe. The breakthrough came by accident, which in my experience is how most breakthroughs come. I had number 1 and number 6 demonstrate combat techniques to the newer recruits. Just a demonstration, controlled, don't actually break each other. Numbers 1 and 6 began sparring with the focused professionalism of soldiers who understood what they were doing. 90 new skeletons watched with their soul fires brightening steadily. Then all 90 grabbed the nearest partner and began fighting. The clearing became a melee immediately. Bones flew. One skeleton's head rolled across the ground like a bowling ball, knocked down 2 others, got picked up and thrown again. I was about to intervene when number 82 struck number 95 hard enough to shatter its chest structure. Number 95's soul fire flickered twice and went out. A pulse of energy moved through the soul link into my body. Faint but clear, the signature of an evolution condition met. I went completely still on my rock. Oh, evolution didn't require careful individual training. It required combat, genuine stakes, first-time experiences of mortal consequence. The chaos in front of me wasn't a failure of leadership. It was a testing ground. I stepped back from the edge of the rock, crossed my arms, and watched with entirely different eyes. Number 8. His left leg stance is weak. Number 37. Pull out a rib if you don't have a weapon. Keep fighting. The winner evolves. The first 40 evolved soldiers stood among the scattered bones of their fallen contemporaries with the quiet solidity of things that had been tested and survived. Numbers 1 through 6, who had been serving as instructors throughout, reached their second evolution through accumulated experience. Number 1's bones sword lengthened and sprouted vicious spikes. A Tier 2 skeleton berserker. Number 2 grew a spine and femur longbow, a Tier 2 archer. 3 through 5 thickened and reinforced in a heavy warriors. Number 6, most dramatic transformation, produced a bone horse beneath him out of nothing, mounting him into Tier 2 cavalry. I revived every skeleton that had fallen in the internal tournament, restoring their accumulated experience while preventing the accumulated experience of defeat from being wasted. Memory remained intact through revival. Even death was just a setback. By the time every one of my 100 soldiers had completed their advancement, I understood something important about what I was building. This wasn't an army of expendable monsters. It was a meritocracy where the currency was genuine capability and the cost of failure was only temporary. The base needed to exist. Skeletons didn't require shelter, but I did, or at least I wanted something that functioned as territory, as the physical expression of an undead civilization beginning to coalesce. Commanding 100 skeleton soldiers in battle was a specific competency I was developing. Directing them in construction was a completely different set of problems. Dig the foundation. 3 skeletons long and 10 skeletons wide. 10 skeletons immediately began digging with their bone swords and shields used as improvised shovels. Their efficiency was impressive. The chaos arrived approximately 90 seconds later when one skeleton became fascinated by the soil composition, dove headfirst into the excavation, and vanished. Only its legs remained visible, kicking steadily above the surface. The skeleton beside it responded to this development not by helping, but by shoveling additional dirt over the submerged one and patting it down firmly. I pulled the buried skeleton out of the ground myself. It shook dirt from its skull with the composure of someone who sees nothing unusual about what had just happened, picked up its bone sword, and resumed digging. The tree-cutting team was managing to climb trees and saw off the branches they were sitting on. The construction team was throwing heavy logs into pits that still contained their colleagues. One skeleton, tasked with testing the structural integrity of a freshly laid foundation, was testing it with its skull. I grabbed that particular skeleton, dropped it into the foundation pit, and buried it up to the neck. You're not allowed out until tomorrow. Understand. The buried skeleton blinked its soul fire and made a sound that might have been grievance. Good. I spent the following hours demonstrating proper technique step by step, personally cutting tree notches to show fall direction, physically guiding hands to show proper wood joining, standing at each station until the motion was approximately correct before moving to the next problem. My frustration burned hot enough that I was fairly certain my eye sockets were glowing noticeably brighter than usual. But something was occurring to me as I moved between the construction disasters. Numbers 2 through 5, who had evolved twice and demonstrated slightly more cognitive depth than the newer recruits, were watching my corrections with what looked like comprehension. I called them over and gave them authority, safety officers and foremen, with explicit permission to bury anyone who made the same mistake twice. The construction improved immediately, not because the workers became smarter, but because the enforcement structure became clearer. A skeleton who understood it would be made into a foundation component. If it climbed the tree, it was supposed to be cutting made different choices than one without that understanding. By the time number 1 returned with the expansion squad, not the 50 he'd left with, but 80, all evolved to Tier 1. The frame of the first structure was shakily upright. When I woke from my resting state, a complete wooden hut stood in the clearing. Crooked, the roof thatched by skeletons who had apparently thrown the materials at each other from significant heights, but structurally intact and sturdy enough to kick. Someone had put wildflowers in the wall cracks, bright red and pink against the rough timber. Who has such terrible taste? I muttered to myself. My soul fire burned with something I recognized as happiness. The moment I commanded an army of 200, something unlocked in the architecture of my power that hadn't been accessible before. I could give true names to my most important subordinates. Not just designations, but actual identities, each one costing a significant portion of my soul's energy and producing something that was genuinely different from a numbered soldier. I gathered all 200 skeletons in the forest clearing and stood before them on my tree stump throne. Today is the day I establish the Undead Empire, I said through the soul link, feeling the words move through every connected soul fire simultaneously. And the day to reward those who have contributed. I walked to number 1. You are my sharp blade. You fight without hesitation, and you have never known doubt. From this moment, your name is Skull Arrogance. The soul energy that left my body was substantial, considerably more than I'd anticipated, a genuine expenditure that left me slightly dizzy. But number 1, Arrogance, shuddered as the name took hold, and the transformation was immediate and dramatic. His bone sword lengthened by half a meter, sprouting cruel spikes along its length, becoming something that looked less like a weapon and more like an instrument of systematic destruction. He grew taller. Bone spurs erupted at every joint. The aura around him changed from the simple presence of an undead soldier to something that made the air feel heavier. Third Order Skeleton Berserker Swordmaster. I turned to number 2. You see everything. Distance is irrelevant to your vision. Your name is Skull Jealousy. The bone bow behind Jealousy transformed, lengthening, the draw weight shifting perceptibly upward. The arrows in its quiver condensed into cold blue light at their tips. Third Order Poisonous Archer. Number 3. You hold the line. You absorb what others cannot. Your name is Skull Gluttony. Gluttony's chest and ribs expanded outward with a sound like stones grinding together. The bone shield on his left arm grew rapidly, thick plates layering themselves over the original structure until he was less a soldier with a shield and more a mobile fortification. Third Order Giant Bone Shield Skeleton. Number 4. I paused here, reaching for something I wasn't fully certain would work. You have shown curiosity where others showed only obedience. You are driven by desire for knowledge. Your name is Skull Lust. A twisted blackthorn staff materialized in number 4's hand from nothing. The soul fire in his eye sockets shifted from the standard white to a deep, interrogative purple. Third Order Skeleton Mage. I was feeling the drain now, a hollow sensation in whatever served me as a core. I pushed through it. Number 5. You remember everything. You calculate what others ignore. Your name is Skull Greed. The power poured in differently this time. Not lightning but water, spreading through number 5 structure and producing a startling result. Flesh appeared. Dark red muscle and fascia grew visibly over the bone framework, filling out the form, adding mass and strength. A ghoul rather than a skeleton. Third Order Flesh-Eating Ghoul, with command authority over lower units. 1 remaining. Number 6. I looked at the cavalry soldier on his bone horse. You charge without hesitation, and fury is your natural state. From this day, your name is Skull Fury. Crimson energy fused number 6 and his mount together. Not rider and horse, but a single entity with 2 bodies, sharing one purpose. The horse's bones turned black and thickened. Armor appeared on both of them from nothing, black bone plating that caught the light with a cold gleam. The sword became a lance. Third Order Skeleton Knight. I sat down heavily on my throne. The 6 generals knelt before me, each one radiating a presence that was nothing like the skeletal creatures I'd started with in a graveyard, running from an angry villager. I looked at the army assembled behind them and felt something that in my previous life I would have called ambition, but which now felt more like inevitability. All soldiers, I said through the soul link, pushing the will into every connected consciousness simultaneously. The forest fell silent. Attack. The village of Witherbone was already gone from the map before its people were. The man in shining paladin armor, Sir Kyle, traveling with knights bearing the emblem of the holy theocracy of Lost Arn, had arranged his story carefully. The villagers who followed a familiar face toward what they believed was safety found instead a rain of arrows on an open road. The bodies were dressed afterward in theocracy rags, rusty weapons tossed nearby, a crude performance of story that would serve its purpose because the people who mattered would want to believe it. The old village chief had been at the back of the migration column. He'd seen the banner wrong, recognized hams among the riders, and understood the shape of what was happening before it fully happened. He slipped into the roadside brush while everyone else was surging forward. He ran back the way he'd come, bleeding from thorns, barely sleeping, driven by the specific fuel of a man who knows he is carrying a warning that will not arrive unless he arrives first. When he finally reached the remaining villagers, 13 of them, the ones who had stayed behind, he could barely speak. His warning came out in fragments and desperation, and the villagers heard it with the suspicion of people who have watched their community shrink and don't have enough trust left for convenient emergencies. Into the bone forest, the old chief said. The reaction this produced was immediate and unanimous. You've lost your mind. Spirits live there. You took half our people and came back alone. Why should we trust you? He didn't have the energy left to argue. He fell. The strong man who had been questioning him the loudest stood over the unconscious elder for a long moment, then clenched his teeth, bent down, and hoisted the old man onto his back. Let's go, he said. Trust him one more time. If he's been lying this whole time, I'll personally put his head through his own apple pie. They disappeared into the forest shadows, just ahead of the sound of hooves. I was in the middle of disciplining a skeleton who had tested the foundation's hardness with its skull when 2 soul messages arrived simultaneously. Arrogance, Master. 13 humble beings have entered your territory. Fury, Master. A cavalry unit approaches. Let me reduce them to ash. I straightened up slowly. 13 villagers being chased by cavalry. Not coincidence, a chase. Someone had done something to someone, and the someone with the horses had come to finish it. I reached through the soul link and pressed a single command into every connected consciousness. Silence. Hide. 1,200 skeletons stopped moving in the same instant. Tools dropped mid-swing. Patrols froze in place. The forest went from the constant background noise of bone on wood to absolute quiet in the space of a single breath. I walked to my throne, sat down, crossed my legs, and extended my awareness through the network of soul links like putting my hands into many streams at once. Through jealousy's elevated vision, I watched the villagers stumble through the undergrowth, the strong man carrying the elder, a woman clutching a child, others with faces tight with the specific terror of people who believe they are already dead. Through Fury's cavalry patrol, I watched Sir Kyle ride at an easy pace, his face carrying the gentle, sorrowful expression of a man performing compassion for an audience that couldn't see through it. He spotted the smoke signal the villagers had foolishly lit, visible for a kilometer in any direction, and redirected his column toward it with the unhurried certainty of someone who believes the prey has nowhere to go. The cavalrymen spread out when they found the villagers efficient and practiced, the movements of people who have done this before and have stopped thinking of it as anything in particular. A woman holding a child ran the slowest. A knight broke from the group toward her, sword rising. I moved one finger. A bone hand erupted from the earth, seized the horse's ankle, and pulled. The horse screamed and went down, throwing the rider, and arrogance rose from the soil with his skull-splitting sword already formed, appearing behind the knight before the man had finished rolling to his feet. Even insects that don't understand sustainable development, arrogance said, the first words any of my generals had spoken aloud, don't deserve to enter the realm of rulers. The knight saw his own shadow split and fell. Across the clearing, 100 pale forms materialized from the tree line, the undergrowth, the shadow between branches. 1,000 more waited in the forest behind them, deep enough that their numbers weren't visible, but present enough that their aura was. The sound was nothing, no battle cries, no threats, just bone on soil and the quiet arrival of something that had been patient. Sir Kyle's horse reared. His carefully maintained, gentle expression faltered for the first time. The knights charged. Cavalry charges tend to end engagements quickly when the target is made of flesh. Against soldiers who reassembled themselves after being cut down, stood up, and resumed fighting with their own mortality no longer relevant to their tactical calculations, the charge accomplished nothing except bringing the cavalry within reach of the bone weapons. Each knight who fell rose again. The soul fires in their eye sockets burned with the particular loyalty of the freshly converted, and they turned their swords on their former companions with the impartiality of things that no longer remembered choosing sides. Sir Kyle attempted to identify the leader, identified arrogance, the most obvious candidate, the one who kept appearing in the center of things, and charge him with his knight's fighting spirit activated. It was genuinely impressive technique. It also missed completely because arrogance stepped aside with the casual economy of someone who wasn't especially threatened, and the follow-up strike that Kyle attempted resulted in a bone foot connecting with his armor at a speed that sent him backward into a tree hard enough to leave a clear footprint in the steel. He knelt in the snow, coughing blood. The clearing was silent except for the settling of dust. Kyle and two attendants were the only living humans still standing. Behind him, his former soldiers stood in the formation of their new allegiance. I spoke. "Tell me everything I want to know," I said, and my voice carried the resonance of the death energy properly for the first time. Not jaw-clacking, not approximated speech, but actual words delivered with actual weight. The advancement had given me that. This is your only way to survive. Kyle drew himself up with the dignity that Imperial Knights apparently receive training in. You will get nothing from me. Monster, you desecrate life itself. I looked at him for a moment, then turned to Lust with a small gesture. An invisible wave of mental energy spread through the clearing, and Kyle went into the wooden hut. The sounds that followed suggested the mental wave was effective. The two attendants, Lloyd and Rosen, were on their knees with their foreheads on the ground before the door finished closing. Master, Supreme Lord, we will tell everything. I learned the shape of the world in pieces over the following hours. The strength system, fighting spirit activated through meditation and physical training, levels 1 through something higher than 3, with Iron Fortress's Lord, Viscount Andrew, representing the confirmed ceiling of local power at Tier 3. The Imperial capital reportedly had beings at Tier 5 and possibly 6. The Emperor's Lionheart Guard confirmed at 5. My 6 generals were at Tier 3. I was at Tier 3. Viscount Andrew and my generals occupied the same tier. This was useful information. The political landscape. Iron Fortress was a vassal of Count Barton, operating as the dominant power in the region. The holy theocracy of Lostarn was performing false flag operations to create pretexts for conflict between the Empire and the theocracy. Sir Kyle had been the operational center of this particular scheme. Kyle himself, once the mental interrogation concluded, had nothing more useful to offer. I had the 2 attendants and 13 villagers who were collectively everything I needed to begin building the knowledge infrastructure of an actual civilization. The blacksmith was a man named Paul, who admitted his skills were limited to simple tools and nails with the apologetic honesty of someone expecting punishment for inadequacy. "That's enough," I said, and directed 10 skeleton soldiers to stand before him. "They are your apprentices. Teach them to forge metal." Paul looked at the 10 skeletons, each taller than him, each holding a bone sword, and his legs wobbled. He calculated his options, found only one with acceptable survival odds, and knelt. "Blacksmith Paul, I am willing to serve you." The remaining villagers, farmers, primarily, received equivalent assignments in agricultural instruction. Plowing, planting, irrigation, harvest cycles. Everything. They had all seen the skeletons protect them. They had watched an army of undead materialize from the forest floor and dismantle a cavalry unit that had been trying to kill them. Their terror was real and appropriate, but underneath, it was something that might eventually become trust if I didn't make any catastrophic errors.